Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're logging from. Welcome to the 24/7 Carbon-Free Energy Compact Workshop. My name is Maja Gršić, and I'm a Programs Associate at SE for All, and I'll be your host today. Before we start, just a few housekeeping items. Please keep your microphones on mute so that there is no background noise. And if you have any questions for our presenters, please post them in the chat below. This session is going to be recorded, and after it, we are going to share all the slides with you. Without further ado, I will pass the microphone to His Excellency Mr. Jörundur Valtýsson, Permanent Representative of Iceland to the UN. Ambassador, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, distinguished colleagues and guests. Good morning here from New York, and good afternoon and even evening for some of you. It's an honor for Iceland to co-host this workshop together with UN Energy. As a global champion, Iceland has participated actively in the process around the UN high-level dialogue on energy. For us, this was not a one-off event, but rather really the beginning of a new chapter in renewing global efforts to drive the sustainable energy agenda. Energy compacts are a concrete framework for participating in the push towards achieving SDG 7 by 2030, as well as net zero emissions by 2050. Along with presenting a national energy compact, Iceland has joined two multi-stakeholder energy compacts, the Gender and Energy Compact, and the one we will be discussing today, namely the Energy Compact on 24/7 carbon-free energy as the path to net zero. The compact represents a new global effort to accelerate the transition to a carbon-free electricity sector in order to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change. A carbon-free electricity sector is really the foundation for creating a net zero emissions global economy. Electricity generates some 25% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions and is key to decarbonizing other sectors of the economy, including buildings, transport, and industry. We want to echo UN Energy's call on companies, governments, and other stakeholders to join the compact and commit to advancing policies and procurement practices critical to fully decarbonize the world's electricity systems. Iceland is in a good position to support this effort, having a carbon-free electric grid, which serves all its people with clean and sustainable energy. I want to underline that having started the transition to sustainable energy early on has brought multiple benefits to Iceland as a country, as well as the general public and individual households. It has, for example, increased energy security and economic empowerment. We will continue our energy transition, and as portrayed in our National Energy Compact, we aim to become free from the use of fossil fuels at the latest by 2050, and carbon neutral by 2040, and renewable energy in transport will be at least 40% by 2030. We will also take measures to improve energy efficiency and minimize energy waste. It's not enough to produce carbon-free electricity. We must use it wisely. And increasing energy efficiency requires, among others, support for innovation. And speaking of support, I think it's relevant to mention that according to an analysis presented by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, this month, the fossil fuel industry benefits from $11 million subsidies every single minute. Let me just repeat that, $11 million subsidies every single minute. This is obviously very hard to compete with and really must be reversed. Colleagues, guests, allow me towards the end of my remarks to touch upon the international element of our National Energy Compact. Iceland will increase climate-related financing, focusing on the transition to sustainable energy. We will support countries in increasing the share of renewable energy and in transitioning to the circular economy through direct multiple use of energy, including for food production. And in this context, I would also mention the important role of geothermal energy in the renewable energy mix. And furthermore, we will help advance gender equality in the just transition to sustainable energy, including through technical training. This is really important for us. And lastly, zooming in from the international to the local government level, we are delighted to be joined by the city of Des Moines here today. Indeed, in order to achieve carbon-free energy on all grids, everywhere, day and night, participation on all levels is needed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the insightful remarks. I will now give the microphone to Mr. Jeremy Karen, who is a Sustainability Manager of the City of Des Moines. Mr. Karen, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to join other signatories to the compact today to highlight why Des Moines has decided to pursue 24/7 carbon-free energy. There are really 5 key reasons that are driving this for the city of Des Moines. One is to realize the sustainable development goals that the UN has created here at the local level. A resident survey that we conducted in 2020 showed declining confidence in the city's efforts to address sustainability and energy efficiency and transition to clean energy. Shortly after that, my position was created, and we've worked over the last year and a half to really advance efforts towards sustainability across the city, updating our climate action goals, and really focusing on ways to advance our efforts on sustainability. And really with a focus on creating clean air and water across our community. We face challenges from watershed pollution and air pollution that we're trying to address across our community, and we want to make sure that we improve health outcomes for our residents and provide ultimately a better quality of life. And then second, I think a point that we want to touch on is leading by example. We made early commitments over a decade ago following the Paris Climate Accord to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 28% by 2025. Those commitments are outdated at this point. And so earlier this year, we passed a resolution committing to 24/7 carbon-free electricity by 2035 and a 45% reduction in emissions by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050. And so those would be the goals that are driving our climate action planning over the next several years and the work that I'll be doing around sustainability more broadly. And then also I want to highlight that Mayor County is currently the president of ICLEI Global, and certainly a part of the global conversation, encouraging subnational governments to take action and advocate for clean energy and other sustainability goals at the UN and within their national governments and local communities. And then we've also driven regional conversations and local conversations with other communities and have provided guidance and insight to their leadership and their staff as they work towards adopting similar goals. The third point I really want to touch on is that this drives economic development for Des Moines as well. Local generation means good paying local jobs, investments in manufacturing that stay in our community, help address the goals of our corporate partners that are local businesses or businesses looking to locate to Des Moines that have their own environment, social, and governance goals that they're trying to address and attain. And so we're hoping that we can use that as a tool to attract additional economic investment in the city of Des Moines and improve our community. And then lastly, accelerating R&D and driving electrification for our buildings and our transportation sector are really part of this economic development opportunity as well. And this also helps us maximize our investments and increase our financial strength by reducing risk, both in our bonding capacity and credit ratings for the city. as we show that we are committed to addressing climate change and transitioning to clean energy that is reliable and affordable for our community. And then the last thing I want to touch on, our fifth sort of key reason to commit to this compact, is increasing access to affordable energy for our community members. Oftentimes, those most vulnerable and those that are part of the Black, Indigenous, and people of color community within Des Moines have borne the brunt of higher energy costs and dirty fossil fuel energy. And so by committing to this compact, we are reducing energy burdens, we are improving health outcomes, and in providing access to clean and reliable energy. And so I'm excited to join my counterparts here today and look forward to the rest of this discussion and encourage everyone on this call to take action in their local communities, join this compact, and help us drive change across the energy industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karen. It's really great to hear about the work you're doing and Des Moines really setting a good example. I'll now pass the microphone to our first presenter today, Mr. George Hampton, Senior Advisor to the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Sustainable Energy and CEO of SE for All. George?
Hi, Maya. Thank you very much. And look, just to start with, what fantastic examples, these are so much more interesting than my presentation, as much as I will try and make it interesting will be. In particular, thinking about the words of the permanent representative of Iceland, the beginning of a new chapter. I think it's very eloquently putting how we see these energy compacts and the potential that they hold. As he said, sort of a concrete framework, in particular for an area that we think has lacked accountability and action, and particularly given how off track we are. And at the same time, what a great example from Des Moines. It really shows the benefits of taking charge, even at the micro level of the energy transition and the opportunities that exist, both for investment, but also for jobs, clean, green, decent jobs, and taking charge of the transition. So without further ado, I'll just go into a little bit of a brief presentation around the energy compacts. But again, a huge thank you to our partners who have come on the call and those who have already committed to energy compacts. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate the support, particularly from Iceland for the workshop today, and of course from our partner Google, who we'll hear from shortly about the 24/7 compact. So now 3 weeks ago, almost, the UN held the first global summit, first UN summit on energy since Nairobi in 1981, 40 years ago. Back then in Nairobi, this energy summit then was held in the wake of the oil crisis. Today, we find ourselves faced with at least two crises on energy. One around, we've already hinted at today, around climate change and energy's impact on emissions, and the second around energy access. And overall, the rationale for the thing we'll talk most about today, which is energy compacts, comes from the root of those two crises. The world is well off track from meeting its global goals on energy. And when I say global goals, obviously I mean, and this crowd knows very well, the SDG 7 and the Sustainable Development Goal agenda, and then also the Paris Agreement and more broadly net zero emissions by 2050. So just very briefly on the sub-goals of SDG 7. So for example, on renewable energy, we rely, I think, well over 2/3 of our energy comes from non-renewable resources. Secondly, energy efficiency. We should be accomplishing almost double-digit growth in energy efficiency. We're in the single digits. We're well off track there as well. And then on to energy access. Obviously, almost 800 million people lack access to electricity. Estimated up to a couple of billion more live in states of energy poverty where they're unable to use electricity for productive use, which affects markets and jobs and people's livelihoods and well-being as well. And then beyond that, clean cooking. Several billion people lack access to clean sources of cooking. So obviously, we have an ambitious agenda to try and reverse that trend by 2030, and beyond that, to try and reverse our reliance on fossil fuels for the predominant source of our energy needs globally. The intention of energy compacts was to try and design a platform that could bring together more action, in particular voluntary commitments by all stakeholders. So anything from Des Moines, a city, to a sovereign state like Iceland, and in between private sector actors like Google or youth groups or others. Next slide. So what we got to, and I'll just take you through this briefly, is really a concept that is both inclusive and flexible, and I'll come back to those words. But it's flexible because of the sort of commitments you can make to an energy compact. As we know from the compact that Iceland submitted to the high-level dialogue, along with 35 other member states of the UN who've made similar commitments on energy compacts. We really designed this so it could take into account any sort of commitment a member state or a stakeholder could bring. So on the left-hand side, there are some examples of the areas, but also the types of commitments as well, because the types of commitments can be existing commitments that a country or a stakeholder may have made. Maybe they're being amped up or raised their ambition, or it could be a new commitment, a new area, and another place for action by that country. It's also an inclusive framework, inclusive in part because all stakeholders are invited from the global movement towards SDG 7 to commit to energy compacts. And finally, it's inclusive as well because of its alignment with other global framework and commitments, in particular to highlight the nationally determined contributions, NDCs. So we worked closely with our colleagues from the COP presidency from the UK, and also with UNFCCC to make sure that the design of the energy compacts existed and not just existed, but mutually reinforces the NDC process and the process towards Paris as well. So in that sense, they're aligned with the commitments that a stakeholder or a country, a party to the Paris Agreement might make as well. Next slide. So in the lead up to the high-level dialogue and to support the high-level dialogue, we had a number of partners involved to help us push this forward. A lot of these partners came forward with energy compacts as well, or put themselves into another sort of energy compact, which we'll come to in a second. You'll see under the third theme there that Iceland is featured. We had a number of other countries also involved, and we're very grateful for their support. We also had a number of UN organizations and agencies on the right-hand side also support us through the process. The support went to mobilizing energy compact outreach, as well as also putting together the themes for the high-level dialogue. Next slide. So here's some of the sense of the outcomes of the high-level dialogue from a couple of weeks ago. And when I say outcomes, I really mean, in this regard, the energy compacts. So we received over 160 energy compacts from a range of actors, as I mentioned, going to this inclusivity point. The headline as well was that we had in those compacts over $400 billion in new finance and investment committed from both governments and the private sector. We also had a number of commitments from those actors to install significant new renewable capacity, and also commitments around bringing access to millions, if not up to 1 billion people through a variety of different partnerships as well. Those partnerships also went to catalytic investments, so partners looking at how they could bring others together and also incentivize sizable investments in renewable energy and in the sort of energy efficiency gains we need, as well as energy access. On the right-hand side there, you'll see a bit of a feature of one of the partnerships, the partnership we're talking about today, which was the 24/7 carbon-free energy compact, led by Google, but launched with a large number of signatories at the high-level dialogue, which is what we're here to talk about today. And again, you'll see from those logos there that we had a real range of stakeholders committing. again, representing the sort of partnership we believe is needed to try and secure the progress towards 2030 and beyond. Next slide. So here's just a few examples of the sort of commitments that stakeholders were invited to make as part of the Energy Compacts. Again, it's important to note, particularly for member states, we're very flexible. We understand that member states, it's a complicated thing, and that not everyone's going to know exactly what they need to do to get to 2030 now. So the Energy Compacts have been designed that a stakeholder can perhaps not have all the answers as to how they're going to meet their commitments on energy, but can make a start in the Energy Compact. And the intention is that we will work with you to help bring that forward. So particularly for member states, we'll look to help match make both with resources and opportunities towards 2030. And that's a really important point, and that's an important role that we hope will be played by UN Energy, which is the UN's coordination body on energy issues, which we'll turn to in a second. At the same time, if you look at those commitments down the bottom, there is multi-stakeholder commitments. So a great example of the multi-stakeholder commitments where a lot of partners can come together, and partners that perhaps wouldn't normally come together around a commitment like this is the Google opportunity. So is the 24/7 carbon-free energy compact, which we'll turn to. But again, we had a number of partnership compacts, for example, around no new coal or green hydrogen, which brought together stakeholders that could perhaps partner and support each other in achieving something that otherwise in a less connected, less cross-cutting world might not be achievable. Next slide. So almost there, I'll finish up in a second, but just to say the process of submitting a compact. So we will provide after this a template of the Energy Compact and some more information. That compact, once drafted, and we can assist particularly with member states in drafting those compacts, is then submitted to UN Energy, reviewed by a number of experts. And then if there are any additions or suggestions for the compact, we then work with the partner to improve the compact and to iteratively move it forward. And again, that's one of the principles of the compact, is that it doesn't just sort of stop at the high level dialogue, and it doesn't stop once you've submitted a compact. The idea is that a compact is something that doesn't exist in stasis, but rather that moves forward over time and can be ratcheted up in ambition as ambition needs to move. Next slide. So finally, we're almost there, only one more slide after this. Just to note that the compacts are assessed against a series of principles. For many of you, these principles will be self-explanatory, going to the SDGs, going to Paris and net zero. But beyond that, also looking at accelerating and stepping up on ambition, excuse me, and also looking towards how the commitments made in the compact can be smart. So how can they be feasible and robust? How can the commitments contain specific indicators or baselines? So again, that's part of how we see the compacts. Next slide. So overall, the compacts are intended to try and bring more political will to energy as an issue, particularly those areas that I mentioned at the start that are perhaps neglected. And it's that sort of leadership and prominence that's really critical and at the heart of the DNA of the Energy Compacts. But at the same time, we've asked member states in particular, but all stakeholders, when putting forward Energy Compacts, to specifically put in the requests for support that they might need, elaborating on exactly what financial or technical capabilities or other resources they might need to push forward on their compacts. And as I mentioned, UN Energy will then try and work with partners to match make to those resources. So look, we're almost there on my part, and we'll hand over to my colleague from Google. But just to say that we really are there to support member states, there to support all stakeholders in coming forward with compacts, but also in supporting the Google CFE 24/7 compact as well. These things aren't difficult to commit to. There may be hard yards in there once a commitment's made to achieve them, but we really strongly urge and encourage all stakeholders on this call, and it's great to see so many people on today, to join up both to the Energy Compacts and to the carbon-free Energy Compact of Google as well. Back to you, Maya. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I will now pass the microphone to Devin Sweezy, Lead of Global Energy Markets and Policy at Google. Devin?
Thank you so much, Maya, and thanks, George, for your remarks. I want to thank all of our distinguished guests for joining today, and I also want to thank Ambassador Valteson of Iceland and Mr. Karen from the city of Des Moines for their remarks, which I think really showed the importance of increasing our ambition to drive toward carbon-free electricity grids this decade, and how this compact is particularly relevant to national and local governments. So the 24/7 Carbon-Free Energy Compact was initially launched on September 24th at the UN High-Level Dialogue on Energy, with the initial list of signatories that you can see here on the right, including a number of energy consumers, energy suppliers, solutions providers, as well as 3 governments, the government of Iceland and city of Des Moines, who we heard from earlier, as well as the city of Ithaca in New York. And we were planning to announce a broader set of signatories during the COP conference in November. Next slide, please. Before introducing the compact, I want to talk about what 24/7 carbon-free energy means. Fundamentally, it means that every kilowatt hour of electricity demand is met by carbon-free electricity sources every hour of every day, everywhere. Now, this is both the end state of a fully decarbonized electricity system, but it's also a transformative approach to energy purchasing, energy supply, and policy design that is key to accelerating grid decarbonization. And electricity is particularly critical to decarbonize as we move towards a net zero emissions economy, since it is both a large source of emissions today, but it is also key to decarbonizing other sectors of the economy, such as transport and industry. In short, we can't have a net zero economy without a zero carbon grid. The graphic at the bottom of the slide shows a visual representation of the difference between 100% renewable energy annual matching goals, which is a goal that Google achieved in 2017, and 24/7 carbon-free energy. And this is an example of our data center in Iowa, where today we purchase significantly more wind-generated electricity than our demand on an annual basis. But there are still significant gaps in supply relative to our stable electricity demand. And even though we purchase 100% renewable energy in Iowa on an annual basis, this hasn't led to the removal of coal-fired power plants operating on the same grid. Next slide, please. And that's what 24/7 CFE is about. It's about orienting the energy ecosystem around the activities that will drive electricity grids to zero carbon faster. And that is why we've set our own goal to achieve 24/7 CFE everywhere we operate by 2030, and why we've worked with Sustainable Energy for All and other partners to launch the 24/7 CFE Compact. Before moving to the Compact, I want to highlight a number of benefits to the 24/7 CFE approach. The first is that it can lead to greater emissions reductions. So the chart on the right comes from AES, an energy supplier and one of the initial signatories of the compact. And it shows 3 of what we call carbon heat maps, which show over the course of an entire year how carbon-free an energy consumer's electricity is based on their purchasing decisions. This example is for a customer in the PJM electricity grid in the United States. And it shows that if a consumer matched 100% of their annual consumption with purchases of solar power, shown at the bottom right, they'd reduce some emissions, but they'd still rely on carbon-intensive power for much of the time. If they purchased 100% from wind power, which is the middle bar, they'd reduce more emissions, but there would still be significant gaps. And if instead a consumer targeted their hourly electricity consumption and purchased electricity from a portfolio of different technologies, and in this case, it's wind, solar, and battery storage, they could reduce emissions even more, even if they didn't match 100% of their hourly electricity consumption. The second major benefit we see to this approach is that it can reduce financial risks for clean energy buyers. By purchasing from multiple different technologies to better align demand with clean energy supply, buyers can better hedge their exposure to more volatile power prices. Third, 24/7 CFE can help ensure a resilient and reliable electricity grid as we continue to decarbonize by supporting the utilization of technologies like energy storage, demand flexibility, or firm carbon-free energy sources that can help integrate renewable technologies like wind and solar. Relatedly, this approach can help drive technology innovation. While wind and solar power will play key roles in driving decarbonization over the coming decades, we will need a broad portfolio of carbon-free energy technologies, potentially including things like advanced geothermal, which Ambassador Valteson spoke about earlier, carbon capture and storage, green hydrogen, advanced nuclear, or long-duration energy storage, among others, to most quickly and cost-effectively decarbonize electricity systems. And 24/7 CFE creates a market demand signal that encourages investments in these kinds of innovative clean energy technologies. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, 24/7 CFE focuses policy advocacy on the grids where power is being consumed. No single buyer will be able to completely decarbonize the electricity grid through procurement alone and without engaging in policy change and partnerships with governments and civil society. So by focusing on 24/7 CFE on every grid where we operate, instead of just purchasing clean energy from a different grid that's far away, we must also advocate for policy change and build the coalitions necessary to transform the grids fully to zero carbon. Next slide, please. So that gets us to the 24/7 CFE Compact and how we can all work together collectively to enable 24/7 carbon-free energy for all. So the Compact is a set of principles and actions that stakeholders across the energy ecosystem can commit to in order to drive systemic change and advance 24/7 CFE and electricity system decarbonization. And it's important to emphasize here that all types of organizations, companies, and governments have a role to play in accelerating the transition to 24/7 CFE, and all can sign the compact. So what do we need? Well, we need to reorient the energy ecosystem to focus on hourly decarbonization of every electricity grid. And that means a number of things. Reorienting clean energy purchasing to move beyond the 100% renewable energy annual matching and drive decarbonization of hourly electricity demand. Creating new products and services that enable around-the-clock clean energy to be delivered to consumers. We need to develop and commercialize advanced carbon-free energy and demand optimization technologies. We need significant policy shifts to enable access to 24/7 CFE and accelerate broader electricity grid decarbonization. And we also need better access to granular energy data to inform and enable higher impact decision-making and decarbonization strategies by both governments and consumers. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the commitments that are outlined in the 24/7 CFE Compact and how they might apply to different types of stakeholders. The first commitment, which is targeted more towards energy consumers, is about adopting over time these clean energy purchasing approaches that target hourly electricity demand. The second is about developing energy supply solutions to enable 24/7 CFE. The third is publicly advocating and supporting energy policies that accelerate decarbonization, which is something that all stakeholders and signatories can commit to. The fourth is developing new carbon-free energy hardware and software technologies that advance 24/7 CFE. And the final commitment is about supporting widespread access to energy data required to enable all consumers to maximize their decarbonization impact. And it's important to emphasize that not all commitments will be equally relevant to all signatories, but each signatory can commit to the broader principles behind 24/7 carbon-free energy. Next slide, please. So on this slide, I wanted to touch on a few ways that governments in particular could advance 24/7 CFE as part of this compact. The first is by committing to enact particular policies intended to accelerate electricity grid decarbonization. A second way is that governments could set targets and clear trajectories for the complete decarbonization of the electricity systems, whether it's a local grid or broader national electricity system. Third, governments are also energy consumers themselves, and they could commit to moving toward 24/7 CFE in the public procurement of electricity. There are already a couple of big examples of this, including in the United States. The Biden administration at the federal level has made a commitment to 24/7 clean power for federal facilities by the year 2035. And we also heard earlier from Des Moines, Iowa, which is the first local government to set a 24/7 carbon-free energy goal. And finally, governments could also support 24/7 CFE by helping to make energy grid and consumption data more transparent and enable more consumers to adopt this approach. So this list is not exhaustive, and the types of commitments that you can make can be spelled out in your individual compacts towards 24/7 CFE, but these are a couple of ideas that I think will be helpful. Next slide, please. So before turning to how you can sign up to the compact, I actually wanted to briefly share some additional information about how Google today is currently supporting local governments in their decarbonization journeys and its relevance to the 24/7 CFE compact as well. So as part of our next decade on climate action, we've actually started working to empower governments seeking to accelerate decarbonization of their cities with data and tools that can better inform decision-making. And we've launched something called the Environmental Insights Explorer, or EIE, and it's a free platform powered by Google proprietary data and developed in partnership with leading climate and sustainability organizations, supporting subnational governments on their climate action planning. And it uses exclusive mapping data sources and modeling capabilities to help cities and local governments measure emission sources, run analyses, and identify strategies to reduce emissions. We just made EIE this year accessible to 3,000 local governments across the world, and we remain committed to advancing this shared vision for carbon-free cities as we work with partners in this space, including ICLE Europe and US, C40, the Global Covenant of Mayors, and others. Next slide, please. This slide just shows a few examples of how this platform EIE has been used to inform city climate strategies. So in the US, the city of Atlanta, Georgia, used EIE to evaluate 7 different clean energy scenarios that could help the city reach a 2050 building decarbonization goal. The city of Houston leveraged EIE's data on rooftop solar potential to set a community goal of generating 5 million megawatt hours from local rooftop and community projects by 2050. And in Curitiba, Brazil, EIE data enabled feasibility studies for generating clean and sustainable energy and informed decisions on renewable energy policymaking, as well as work with local organizations on the ground. So as we expand our work with city governments to enable climate action, we're also committing to help them measure and adopt these ambitious 24/7 carbon-free energy goals in order to accelerate their path and our collective path toward full decarbonization of energy systems. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide, and then we'll take questions, but this outlines how you can sign the compact and get involved in this growing movement. So as mentioned, we'll be announcing a broader set of signatories during the COP conference in a couple of weeks. And if you're interested in signing ahead of COP, what you would need to do is provide your logo that could be included on the compact document, which is on the UN Energy website. And the team is asking to provide it by the 26th of October. Excuse me, the 27th of October. Additionally, signatories are encouraged to work with UN Energy and SE for All to register their own individual energy compacts, laying out commitments related to Sustainable Development Goal 7, which George talked about just before this. And it's important to note that you do not need to register your own individual compact before signing the 24/7 carbon-free energy compact. And the idea is that afterwards you will have ample time and be able to work with UN Energy and Sustainable Energy for All to develop your own compact, which sets out your own commitments around climate and energy and sustainability as part of efforts to move toward SDG 7, some of which can also touch on your commitments related to 24/7 carbon-free energy if you sign the 24/7 CFE compact. Finally, I just wanted to note that if you're interested in getting updates about 24/7 carbon-free energy and this growing movement over time, you can go to 247cfe.com and sign up for being contacted about future opportunities to advance various aspects of this work to decarbonize electricity grids across the world and various partnerships that we're developing in this area. So thank you so much. Appreciate your time and very happy to take any questions about the compact as well.
Thank you, Devin. This was a great presentation. I will now read a couple of questions from the chat. Benjamin Gerber is asking, will this compact support data and modeling standards so that data across various jurisdictions is comparable?
Yeah, thanks, Ben, and great to see you. So Ben is with MRETS, which is a registry in the United States that is assigned the compact, an early signatory of the compact. And this touches on the importance of getting access, consumer access to the granular energy data that allows them to understand how they can have the highest impact on decarbonization and make more impactful decisions on the grids where they're operating. And it really is true that across the world, the level of access and sort of transparency and clarity around energy data really differs very, very dramatically depending on the region of the world and depending on the country. And I think part of this 24/7 CFE Compact is a way to help create those partnerships and the coalitions to focus attention on some of those issues that need to be solved in order to drive electricity grids to zero carbon faster. So it's certainly my hope that as the signatories of this compact, the numbers of signatories of this compact grow, as well as the efforts around grid decarbonization and partnerships that stem from this increase, there will certainly be opportunities to standardize or support energy data transparency in countries across the globe and ensure that we're able to work collectively towards that final outcome in service of grid decarbonization. So it's certainly my hope that that is something that could come out of this, depending on the various partnerships that we develop as a result.
Thank you, Devin. I have another question. Jerry Zief, sorry if I mispronounced your last name. He says, assuming the consumer will have multiple PPAs, how are they structured to deliver on a volumetric approach or on specific timeframes?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. It's a good question, and I'll try to be brief on this because it may be more relevant to sort of energy consumers. One of the things that we are really kind of trying to pioneer as Google in order to create scalable models for other consumers that may not have the same resources as Google or the same sort of expertise is new transaction models that combine different technologies together through either electric utilities or energy suppliers in more competitive electricity markets. An example of this is I mentioned PJM in my presentation and AES, the energy supplier that's one of the original signatories of this compact, where we signed an agreement with them for a portfolio of clean energy technologies, including wind, solar, battery storage, and run-of-river hydro, that collectively would decarbonize our hourly electricity consumption 90% of the time. And that model, I think, is a really important one to help scale this for customers that maybe aren't able to sign their own individual contracts by allowing other parties in the market that are better capable of managing certain risks or of combining those portfolios together to provide those options. And that's really a big part of this, this growing movement is seeing those kinds of energy suppliers, many of whom have signed this compact, really working to innovate around one of those transaction models that can help bring more clean energy of different kinds onto the grid simultaneously and help decarbonize the grid faster.
Thank you, Devin. Another question from Constant. Great to see that solutions providers are included in this to address questions and issues relating to energy tracking mechanisms. Is there an ambition to engage grid operators or regulators as well?
The answer is definitely yes. Actually, the compact also talks about system operators, and system operators are really important stakeholder here. Actually, one of the benefits of the 24/7 CFE approach, from my perspective, is that it helps start to understand the consumption of electricity demand from a consumer's perspective, very much like a grid operator with respect to how they have to work to balance different sources of electricity on the grid at the same time, and the technologies needed to make the grid reliable even as we decarbonize. And so it actually supports the efforts of grid operators in that way. And grid operators are certainly a stakeholder that can sign the compact. And I know a number are we're having discussions with a number about that today. So certainly it's relevant to grid operators as well. And I should say on your question on regulators, yes, absolutely. Regulators, particularly as a sort of function of government, this is relevant to them as well.
Thanks, Devin. Samuel asks, does the compact generally cover for off-grid solutions? How are these catered for, aside from a structured solar farm setting?
Yes, absolutely. Off-grid solutions are certainly covered within the spirit of the compact. If you read the compact document, and it talks about sort of the importance of creating innovative models around new technologies, new hardware and software technologies, grid technologies, I certainly see off-grid solutions, mini grids, microgrids as being an important piece of that, and depending on the context for delivery of electricity in particular countries. And so this is meant to capture what is needed to decarbonize electricity more broadly, including the grid systems that exist today, the grid systems that will exist decades into the future, as well as other solutions, including off-grid solutions that could be relevant.
Thank you, Devin. Again, I can't see any more questions in the chat. Perhaps somebody would like to just raise their hand and I'll call their name. You can also direct the questions to Ambassador Valtison and Mr. Karen. They are still online, I think. George, is there anything that you would like to add then?
Yeah, thanks, Maya. Look, I just wanted to come in and say for partners out there who are keen to move forward with this, as I say, we really urge them to, but to get in touch with us via those email addresses there. As Devin said, this isn't a difficult thing to make the commitment to at this stage. And really, when we're talking about the commitment through to COP, it's about you supporting another version, another launch of this at COP. It's going to be an important moment, and we'd really encourage partners to get involved, but then also encourage stakeholders and member states and everyone to also commit to energy compacts. And again, we're happy to work with stakeholders to develop those compacts with you. So get in touch with us. We're here to help. Back to you, Maya.
Thank you, George. I can't see any more questions, so I will wrap it up. I would really like to thank His Excellency Ambassador Valtison, Permanent Representative of Iceland to the United Nations, and Mr. Jeremy Karen, Sustainability Manager of the City of Des Moines, for their really great remarks. And of course, both to you, George and Devin, great presentations. And as I said, we will be sharing them after that. And as for you, dear participants, I hope that you enjoyed the session and that we managed to inspire you to sign your own 24/7 carbon-free energy compacts. You have an email in the chat, energycompact@scpearl.org. We are here for all of your questions in there to support. Thank you very much for joining, and have a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.